Today's episode, we have Richard Harris, founder of the Harris Consulting Group, whose clients range from Google to Zoom and SalesLoft.
Learn Richard's strategy on how he teaches SDRs to book meetings on LinkedIn and how to build a rockstar profile that will catch your prospect's eye. Your success is our success, so let's get started.
From the heart of Silicon Valley in beautiful San Francisco, California, welcome to the SDR Live podcast with Marcos and Andy.
Awesome. Well, glad to be back on another episode of the SDR Live. Today, we have Richard Harris, the man, the myth, the legend. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I know we got introduced because of David Delaney, and he's the person who one time called me legend, and now people say it, and it really annoys me. I got to find a way to get back at David Delaney, right? So, but I humbly accept it and I appreciate the compliments, but I'm not the end all be all.
Well, we're really excited to have you. And just from afar, looking at all the work that you've done and the help you've had, I think not only for myself, but even Andy, as we were growing our SDR careers. I mean, the information you share is very invaluable. So, would love to learn a little bit more about like just your role, but first, just would love to list off a few accomplishments that I had, and feel free to add any color if you want. You're currently CEO of the Harris Consulting Group, also Director of Sales Training and Consulting Services at Sales Hacker. So some of your clients are Google, Visa, Zoom, SalesLoft, and many, many more. And then on top of that, your 20 plus years of sales experience, you're named 40 most inspiring leaders, top 25 inside sales leaders. I mean, like, Richard, this is like amazing. So I appreciate you hopping on.
That's what I call a legend.
Yeah, please. The one thing I would like to add one thing, because I think it's really important, and I think you guys know, is I'm also a board member of a nonprofit called Uncrushed that focuses on mental health, and particularly mental health and sales, because I think it's really, really important. I've shared my story and struggles of my own mental health and what it's like for me to be what I call a functionally depressed person. So if anybody does have that challenge that's out there, I want you to know you're not alone. And all those accolades are really nice, but that's the one I really want people to know about, is that it takes a lot. Mental health is not mental illness. And that everybody right now with COVID and the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that's really happening, like, we still got to take care of ourselves mentally. So anyway, I'll pause there, but if anybody remembers anything about me, I hope it's that, and that there are resources if you're the kind of person who would like to learn more about it.
That's amazing. Question with Uncrushed. I think that's so important, especially I remember, I think, 3 months into my role as an SDR, I kind of hit rock bottom, and I didn't even know that this was a resource. So, how can I sign up? Is it just like uncrushed.org.com?
Yeah, it's uncrushed.org. There's tons of people like me telling stories, men, women, all genders, all races, sharing whatever's been their own challenge. Lots of real story. I mean, for me, I'm not the person who's a recovering drug addict or alcoholic. I'm not the person who's had an anorexic or bulimia thing, but if you looked at all these people on the surface, you would see this sort of gregarious social salesperson, and underneath it all, we all have our challenges. So, so it's uncrushed.org.
I love that. And I kind of always see going to therapy or like going to a therapist as like, it should be seen as going to a dentist. Like you go
Totally.
You go to a dentist to check in on your health and your teeth, like like twice a year, to understand if like you're doing a good job, if you need to improve on that job and improve on that process. It's exactly the same.
Floss.
Exactly.
I love it. More than twice a year, but yeah, thank you so much for supporting it. Thank you. But anyway, let's go on to what I know you guys really wanted to talk about, but I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to mention that.
Absolutely. And so today's episode is all about why LinkedIn is way more important than prospecting as it relates to your sales career. So, Andy and I are really excited to dive deep with Richard. And I guess mainly the first question that I wanted to ask is, do you have any specific examples, right, for the audience out there on, how to use LinkedIn to your best ability. Because really all I know it for now is somewhat of a brand build, but a lot to just, try to get prospects to get meetings. So maybe I'm approaching it the wrong way.
Well, I think you have to look at it both ways, right? Like LinkedIn is there as an amazing prospecting tool. Like you can't forego that, and it's shifting over time as to what you can do on LinkedIn, and best practices in terms of prospecting. But it is also your career brand, right? Like that's a really important thing, and so you do have to be mindful of that. So on the prospecting side, like in a traditional business SDR role, I would want people to join the right LinkedIn groups that focus on your customers, assuming they're there, right? Maybe, doctors and nurses aren't really on LinkedIn that much, right? Maybe there's some and I just don't know it. But join those groups and add to the conversation. And what I mean by that is like people's posts, comment on it, but never, ever, never, ever, ever talk about what your company does. If
Okay.
someone says, I'm having a problem with this, you can find a delicate way to say, hey, here's what best practices suggest, right? Which are the best practices your company helps people with. And then maybe you could sort of ping them separately in a very non-intimidating way. Hey, Andy, loved your post. I made some best practice comments. Happy to chat with you about what we do, but if that's not where you're at, please just say so. I don't want to be a pain, right? Like ask for permission in a mindset that doesn't make you weak-minded, right? Because you've added value in that post, so you've earned the right to ask for the meeting privately. I would never post in that post, oh, call me, I'll call you. Like that's just terrible, right? It's what everybody else does, so don't do it. So that's on the prospecting side. That's a piece of what I think people should be doing, right? I do think it's okay to in-mail people with value. I think it's okay to connect with people with value. I do not think it's okay to connect with someone, have them accept the meeting, and then turn around and ask, have them accept the invitation and then turn around and ask for a meeting. Terrible. What I would prefer people do, right, is I would much rather see people send an invite that says something like this. Hey, Richard, saw that we're in the same field in sales, looking to expand my network. And by the way, I'm not going to turn around and ask you for a meeting. Right? Do that, because now you're setting yourself apart, because we know these people are getting those kinds of things every freaking day, right? So it's now stand apart, right? Then after you're connected, just be like, hey, I promise I'll never ask you a meeting. I hope it's okay if I send you some content that maybe you're interested in. If you don't want to receive it, just say so and I'll never bother you again. And you send them a link to a blog post or something, right? Like earn the right for those kinds of things, right? So anyway, so those are a couple of prospecting things.
I had a question on that actually myself. So a lot of our audience is just straight up SDRs, right?
Yep.
And they're either starting or they're about to, getting like 6 months in. But SDRs tend to have this scarcity mindset where it's like, well, I better ask for something because we're always taught to ask for the meeting, right? And then, your approach tends to play the long game, I would think. Or do you start to see that actually develops into quality pipeline, right? Because there's always an idea of like, is this quantity? Is this quality? It seems like you're more focused on the quality aspect.
Always quality, right? People who are still, pumping out 100 dials, 50 connects, so many touches, so many tasks, that's okay. I'm still doing those tasks, right? If my boss is telling me to do those things, then, I'd want to see the data behind it. Look, if there's data to support that says, hey, look, if we send out 50 invitations and we get 15 meetings, all right, maybe I'll change my opinion, right? I don't know that particular business, that particular industry. But if someone's doing it just because they're in control and they're the boss, like it means they've never had to do it. They're just being taught. They're just trying to do what they were told to do, right? And that's a big problem. So that's a huge issue. So I believe in quality over quantity, right? Or find a balance. Maybe you do 10 a day quality and 5 a day, sort of just quick meetings, right? Maybe, and see what happens. I would A/B test it for your organization and then show them the data.
Makes
Mm,
sense. My question is surrounding, like I've also taken that approach where I just add value, connect with them, be in their network as well as follow their journey. But it's hard for me to transition if I don't have like a hard ask of like, hey, would you be interested in like these type of products or et cetera? Or
Mhm.
would you say that I should just continue to add value and if they're ready, they will reach out back to me?
A little bit of everything. So one of my favorite techniques, particularly on LinkedIn, is called the interview.
okay.
Um, where basically you just email and say, hey Andy, look, I'm not going to try and sell you my product, but you're a leader in this space, which is where we work. I'm early in my career. Can I interview you to understand, how you see these types of things?
Mm, that's so interesting. Because I try to play with something like that throughout COVID, right? Because it was really hard to say, hey, do you have an ask? It was more like, hey, here's some research that our company has shown through COVID. Are you open to a brief conversation?
Now, now the thing is, you better have good questions,
Yeah,
right? Like you better have more than, so how'd you get started in your role? What keeps you up at night, right? Like, you should ask questions around, how do you prioritize challenges in your world? How do you see that at a corporate level, right? When does a challenge become so much of a pain that you actually want to do something about it, right?
mhm,
Ask them really deep, thoughtful things, and two things will happen. One, you're going to get great content for you to use in other prospecting opportunities with other people. Two, there's often a chance of reciprocity where the person will kind of be like, wow, this person's really good. They're asking good questions. Well, tell me what you do, right?
Ooh.
Um, that happens a little bit, not all the time.
mm,
The other thing that you can also say is like, hey, I've got 4 questions for you, Andy. Before I ask you them, I want you to have my perspective. I'm going to tell you 4 things we do. I'm not trying to sell you. I promised I wouldn't, but I want you to have perspective. Is that okay? Right? And
yeah.
then you better have it nailed down. Andy, we solve this pain, and this pain, just so you understand where I'm coming from. Now I've got like, you don't even pause to wait for him or her to say okay, right? You just sort of go, that's what we do. Now I'm going to ask you my questions and just roll with it, right?
Mhm.
Mm.
Um, so those
And
are
with
those are techniques that I encourage highly. Um, I mean, in email or LinkedIn in particular.
Great. And would these interview questions relate to the product or mainly relate to their day-to-day challenges or their role or their
I would
journey?
I would I would try to relate them to the product or the service you have in their day-to-day role.
Mhm.
Hey, we solved this. How often do you see that as an issue? Um, how have you guys tackled this kind of issue before? Right?
Nice.
Um, what should I know about this kind of issue based on your role that I don't know, or that even my marketing team's not smart enough to figure out? Right? Like, ask them really poignant questions.
And typically, Richard, you have more experience than we do at this, but how do prospects tend to resonate with that? Do they like that, the fact that we're asking those poignant questions?
Yes. So I think there are 2 questions there, and I'll make an assumption. One is, why does it work? Which is, it works because you're stroking their ego, and
Mhm.
not in a manipulative way. Like, I don't want people to see this as manipulation. I want you to see this as like, this is how I educate myself about being a good salesperson. This is how I educate myself and having a process. Here's a way to educate myself about my product and my industry. Here's a way I could take that knowledge and share it with someone else in my company. So there's multiple prongs to you doing this aside from trying to close a deal,
Mm.
right? Every conversation you have has multiple outcomes, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think people do appreciate. Nobody's ever said, Richard, I'm not answering that question, right? Or, and I won't say that it hasn't happened, right? Because I'm not on every call, but I've never had anybody call me back and say, Richard, that blew up on me, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And even if one blows up on you, like, that's one out of how many, and who cares,
Yeah.
right? Like, you caught somebody on a bad day. On the other hand, they said yes to the interview. Like, what did you think this was going to be, a powder puff interview? Like, that might be what they're expecting, but like,
Yeah. No, I think that's great insight. I'm actually going to start using that, probably starting today. And a lot with that too, and what I've been seeing is that when you ask for, either an interview, right? People automatically go to your LinkedIn, right? And I know that was a second part, which is, prospecting, but then also it's building like the brand. Can you share with us, why that's so important?
About why you build your brand on your LinkedIn profile?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I'm gonna can we do a share screen on this? So this is my buddy Tom who does Coffee Talk with me, right?
Okay.
And we've been talking about LinkedIn profiles. And so you'll see, under his sales manager West, like for Tom, you need, if people are going to go look at your profile and you're building your career, right? You're going to go talk to another sales leader. Look at what you see under Tom's name, under sales manager West. Like, what does that tell you?
I see quantifiable impacts.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing I would actually tell him that I will tell him is that he needs to make Microsoft and Tableau the very first parts of that sentence because they get lost.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right?
And is there a reason why you would put the Microsoft and Tableau before the quota attainment?
Well, I'm not saying it needs to be before quota attainment. No.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that sentence that says directly managed relationships
Okay.
doesn't, like, directly managed relationships is not worthless, but it's not the most impactful thing.
Right.
I want somebody to see those words Microsoft and Tableau and go, oh, what about Microsoft and Tableau?
That's so interesting because I remember when I went to your profile, the first thing that stood out for me was Google, Zoom, all the customers that you're working with right away.
Yeah, so it's interesting. If you go back and look at my profile, I'm probably not following even my own best practices. Because I'm not in a traditional role, right? Like that's just, it's just there now. And I've talked to Tom about this too, right? And go look at his other role, right? Account executives, he's not you can see the difference literally between the bullet points showing revenue and then a paragraph read.
Mm.
And if your audience is a VP of sales, CRO, CEO who's revenue driven, right? They have very short attention spans. Like a goldfish is a genius compared to most CROs I know in terms of attention span. Right? Myself included. Those numbers stand out. Like that's the first thing I want people to see.
Okay.
Right? Now there's this other belief that companies, and I get into arguments all the time with it, your company does not own your LinkedIn profile, period. So, if I go up to the top of Tom, now it's Tom's decision to put this up here. Mm-hmm. If Tom wants to put it up there, I'm all for it. I don't mind. But there's also a way that it could still be Tom, right?
Yeah.
I could see if Tom were in a job seeking market, which he's not, I could see leaving it up there because it might catch someone's attention or, what I mean? Like, I get it. Like, I understand it. But your company doesn't own this. Your company doesn't own your about section, right? They don't. People say, well, what if they pay for my sales LinkedIn Navigator? Well, fantastic. They own that. They can own that.
Yeah. You
bought me Navigator. You're not paying for my license,
right?
So, and even then I would still argue with them. But, it goes back and forth. Let me rephrase that. There are some people who get it. And look, if you're a startup, I have tremendous friends and a lot of respect for the outreaches and sales lofts of the world. I know everybody of those places, and they want a consistent brand across LinkedIn. And I get from a sales and marketing perspective why that works. Yeah, but that's the challenge, right? Now I think Gong has even done it, but I think Gong even takes a picture of the employee in front of the logo, so then it can kind of combine both, which I really like because it allows that creativity and human piece to come through. So those are huge pieces for me.
Awesome. Quick question. So kind of circling back to having your accolades and your specific metrics of kind of your quota attainment, et cetera, on your LinkedIn profile. I actually personally follow what you showed us of that. And however, I do have people telling me that they think it's not as customer facing, because for me, I have my quarter number as well as my quota attainment for my year. But what do you say to kind of The people who don't believe that is customer facing, as well as
But you're
thinking that
bragging.
Yeah,
yes.
the bragging. I get that
Yeah.
too as
All
well.
right. So let me ask you a question. Who do you sell to, Andy? Because I don't know the answer to that.
CRO, VP of sales.
Okay. So seriously, a CRO, a VP of sales, they're going to get offended by that? Has any of them actually said that to you?
No.
Yeah, fuck them. Right. not the CRO, the people who are telling you that.
Right.
That's the first thing. Second thing, I would say is, are you still hitting your quota?
Yes.
And present of the COVID situation, right? Present of what's happening in the, we're recording this June 10th of 2020. Are you still doing well in your role as one would expect?
Right. I am.
Cool. So Marcus, is it Marcus or Marcos, by the way?
Oh, Marcos, yeah.
So you're at Okta, right?
Yeah, so totally different persona.
So let's talk about that. First of all, I'm a shareholder. I bought it on day one, so keep hitting your number. Right? So don't mess this up. Let me ask you this question, and you're selling mostly to IT people.
IT, but also developers as well now.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. What I would say the engineering mindset.
Yep.
Do you follow this model like Andy does, or not really? Have you not done this to your profile?
Yeah. So like at Optimizely, yeah, I have like my accolades. As far as Okta, I don't put any of my like past performance there.
And how are you doing? Are you hitting your number?
Yeah. 100%.
I mean, that's, people's opinions, we got to be careful, right? And I'm the same way. And I say this all the time, is like, you might listen to this and go, oh my God, I'm going to go change my profile. And, I'm going to do what Richard and Andy and Marco said. And it's kind of like, well, be mindful of who your customers are. I get it. I've yet to find, now you'd have to go look at the people who viewed my profile. Go look at that and actually go back to your top 25 or 30 people you've tried to contact with. See how many of them have looked at your profile. Right? Like, do the data science behind it to help you support your decision. If only 1 or 2 out of 25 are looking at it, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Even if 20 or 25 are looking at it, I don't know that I would worry about it too much. Okay. I think particularly in your world, as you do sell to the engineering mindset, you could say something about, these are the pains Okta does, right?
Yeah.
Have worked with, you could have the number 50 developers and IT professional customers, right? So now all of a sudden you've got some social proof, right? Clients include blank, blank, blank. Again, social proof, right? Yeah. Maybe you don't put your revenue stuff on there. It's okay. I get why you wouldn't, but there's still a way to create some stuff there. And frankly, I wouldn't, until the data showed me that I was hurting by having that information, then I wouldn't worry about putting my revenue number. I would put it there and not be worried about it.
No, this is great. Man, I feel like I'm getting free coaching advice right on our podcast. So I really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Natural teacher, Richard Harris. So I guess, just to wrap it up, I want to be cognizant of time. We do have a few questions if you want to stop sharing your screen and share mine from the audience. All right, questions from the audience. Let's see, give me 1 second. Okay, cool. So first question from John, notice that you post 3 to 4 times a day. Is there a reason behind that?
Yes, I'm stupid. The theory is that if you're gonna game the LinkedIn algorithm, right, you're supposed to post at 6 a.m. Pacific time, 9 a.m. Eastern time. It's a text only post. Any link should be done at in the comment section. LinkedIn doesn't like links in the main body. They don't like images, and believe it or not, they don't like videos. Now, I probably violate all those rules because I'm so OCD about trying to get good content out there. But that's how you get better views. Like so 3 to 4 times is probably too much. But I also think I can't help myself. So.
Well, I love it. Continue to keep posting 3 to 4 times a day, because everything I've seen from you has been of value. So I really appreciate that. Next question comes from Shannon. How important are
Oh, actually, I want to add one more thing.
Yes.
The other, particularly right now, because with everything that's going on in the world, I've been trying to do as many things like this with you. So I've been saying yes to everything. And so a lot of my posts have to do with what am I doing, what's coming up, what's live, what's recorded, because I do want people to find that content. So if I do that once in the morning, then usually by the afternoon, I feel like I need to put something really valuable out there, not like, hey, talk to me or listen to me. So that's also a piece of it. That's a great question, John.
Awesome. Next one's from Shannon. How important are recommendations and endorsements to building your brand? I would think on LinkedIn.
I think they're great. I think they're as good as having a G2 review, right?
Oh, yeah.
This is your G2. LinkedIn is your personal and professional G2. So go get them. Ask for them.
Okay.
Lots of times, and this is the best way to ask for one, is to simply say, hey, Marcos, you and I worked together last year on two things. Would you be comfortable posting this as a recommendation for me, and write it out so that literally all you need to do is copy paste it?
Yeah.
If not, please feel free to, if you're comfortable doing it and you want to write something else, I'm okay with that too.
I love it. You're making it as easy as possible for you to get that recommendation.
Always.
Yeah. And it's personal too, a personal note as well. I know a lot of people that ask for just my recommendation. They don't say anything. It's just the generic, can you just write me a recommendation? And I'm like,
and I haven't used that part of the platform where you request that on LinkedIn in a long time.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's a limitation, that it's just a button and that's what they get, or if you can actually customize it. I hope you can customize it. If you can, do.
Yeah, no, that's great insight.
Awesome.
So this kind of leads really quick into one of our last questions, but Sam was wondering which type of content, video, written format tends to resonate the most. Now, hearing you earlier, it was mainly, video doesn't do too well, but it seems like it's kind of a hodgepodge of different types.
So it's a couple of things, right? So one, I think video is really good. I think it's great in prospecting, like, Vidyard and the different tools around that. I think they're excellent. Sometimes you're doing different stuff different days just to be different, right? Long form posts for certain days, maybe do a video just to change it up. Like there's value in that too, so that people don't start to see stuff and scroll over you, right?
Yeah.
So, but quality content always rises, right? Awesome. So I think the question, and this is what I tell most people, and if most people are SDRs, don't worry about all this kind of stuff. Just start writing, just start posting, just start sharing on. Look, the worst thing that's going to happen, 100 people are going to see it. You know what that means? 1 billion didn't. So don't worry about it. You don't look foolish, right? Like don't let that scare or intimidate you.
I love that too, because like a lot of times mentally it's like, do we post this? And then we kind of think of all the repercussions that can happen, but just starting,
but invite the criticism. That's one of the things that gets the most views. Hey, here's my belief. I'd love somebody to tear me down and tell me why I'm wrong.
Oh, interesting.
Now there's a dialogue. Now you start to see comments, right? The comments are the most fun, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's great. And then the last one before you have to go here, which I think is interesting, but someone went on your LinkedIn and said, what do these mean? Shit, my sales manager used to say, Surf and Sales. I know Surf and Sales is a podcast you have going, but I think there's a little bit more like the mental
there's
health.
Way more. So
get off my lawn, etc.
Yeah, so I'll give you a couple things. So Surf and Sales is actually an event that we've been hosting in Costa Rica for the last few years. We just had our last one in February, right before COVID hit. We were supposed to have one in September. We take about 16 or 17 people, sales roles, SDRs, AEs, VPs, whatever. We spend about 4 days on the ocean in Costa Rica. 4 hours a day on the water surfing, sort of 2-hour surf sessions if you want to surf. And then we spend the other 4 or 5 days of the hours of the day doing content. So we might actually run a LinkedIn, like a much deeper dive on LinkedIn for an hour, have people start to work on their profiles. We might run in, all kinds of stuff. I've done stuff on mental health. Scott Leese has done stuff on his sales process. We also have people who attend, like if one of you guys wanted to come and you guys had something you're really passionate about, we'll let you speak for 30 or 40 minutes. Like, we don't need to control the content. So it's an actual event. The event came long before the podcast. So that's what Surf and Sales is. So that's what's happening. Millennial X Coffee Talk started a couple of months ago under COVID with my friend Tom. And the thought was that as all these happy hours are happening, which are great, go to them. One, we didn't see a lot sort of happening in the morning or during the day. Not that we need 300 people to show up, but it's kind of like, well, let's do something in the morning, right? So because I'm on the West Coast, it's 9 a.m. Pacific time, which is lunchtime on the East Coast. So hopefully people can still attend. Millennial X he's the millennial, I'm the Gen X. His hashtag is whatever Gen X, and mine is get off my lawn. And we try to tackle issues from a generational perspective, managing people in different generations, understanding compensation, what it means at one level versus another level. If you're 40 something and you're looking at compensation plans, it's very different than what you would take if you were 20 something, right? Like, it's just different. And having those kind of conversations in a generational and fun way, like we call each other out on stuff all the time. So that's what Get Off My Lawn is from. Mental health, we talked about that as Uncrushed. Shit, my sales manager used to say, actually started by my friend Kevin Gaither, who is the SVP of sales at ZipRecruiter. And he used to send these things to me about these little one-liners that my boss used to say, time to smile and dial, that kind of stuff. Right?
Oh, gosh.
And so I took it and ran with it. And we just did some analysis. I've posted over 300 of them in the last couple of years. And so we're actually going to go take and make a downloadable, I don't know if it's an ebook. I wouldn't necessarily call it as E stands for entertaining, maybe. Education.
Entertaining.
Right. So that, and some of it's real and some of it's not. Like, some of them are like, if your leadership team isn't taking the pay cut they're asking you to take for COVID, it's time to find a new leadership team. Like, that's what a good sales manager should say. Right. Mm-hmm. Then there's sort of the office space kind of stuff too.
Okay, that's great. And I think you alluded to this a little bit, but say there's an SDR out there. A lot of them are interviewing now. What's a good source to? Do you have any good sources that they can use? I know your website is amazing. So
thank you. So I'm going to give a couple of tips. And then, obviously there's a resource I can give, and I promise I'm not trying to sell anything. It's free. The first thing I want anyone to remember, I don't care what role you're in, you're interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you, right? You want to talk about culture fit? Can you fit into their culture? Well, can they fit into your culture?
Yeah.
Right. Now, that doesn't mean if your culture is like, hey man, I want to work, whenever and, whatever, no, that's not what I'm talking about. But when you talk about company values, do you even know what your own values are? Have you written them down on paper? Have you figured out ways to ask that question? Right. Have you asked questions of your boss of, these are the kinds of questions I want people to ask their leadership is, hey, how do you like to coach people? How often do you coach them? Right. Aside from me hitting my number, Marcos, what else do you need me to do to help you do your job? If I ask my potential boss that question, one, they're never going to answer. They've never had that asked of them. And they're going to be impressed because they realize that you understand a bigger picture.
Yeah.
And I call it, that will get you shortlisted. It won't get you the job, but it should get you shortlisted.
Wow.
Great insight.
So the second thing I want to tell people, particularly in SDRs, right? If we're talking about the traditional SDR that we see in the market today, look, I'm in the Bay Area, so it has this sort of, someone early in their career, often just out of college, all those kinds of things. Remember, your SDR is not your career choice, right? Like, my career choice is, I don't know yet. I'm 20 something. Seriously. And so it's a really stupid question when your boss says, where do you want to be in 5 years? Well, the answer you have to give in those interviews, particularly if you want the job, is, look, I want to move up into a sales role. The real answer should be, I don't fucking have a clue. But if I come in here and perform and I just see that there's another role in another department, I'm going to fucking apply for it.
Yeah.
Now, the reason you can't say that is because then that leader has to go, well, am I going to invest my time in this person? And that's a fair thing for them to think. Like, it's totally appropriate as a sales leader who has to hit their number to not want to have to retrain people. And granted, yes, you can train them and have them go to other departments, but that's, ultimately that's not their job. As a manager, that's what I did, right? I would, people would say, I would ask them the 5-year question. Well, and I would say, really, you're 23. Are you really sure? And they would go, well, I said, here's what I want you to know. Should you come work for me, my expectation is you're going to be in this role for this amount of time. Assuming you do your job and you find something else here that entices you, go for it. I'm not going to stand in your way, because it looks good for me as a manager to have more people promoted under me. It looks good for me as a manager if I don't have a lot of churn, right? That helps my career, right? So those are the kinds of things that I would want you to be aware of. I do have an ebook that's supposed to be educational on my website about how to own the interview process. It teaches you how to get the interviews and then the kinds of questions you should be asking. It also has questions that leaders should be asking the candidates so that you can have more real conversations. I'm tired of sort of the fake conversations I know that occur in the interview process. So you can go to the harrisconsultinggroup.com. I think it's at the very bottom of the homepage. You have to scroll down, and it's a free download. So if people are interested, they're welcome to it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to do that right now too. I was actually looking at the website. I'll put the link in our description. And
Great.
Call to action. We always like to have a call to action for all the SDRs. Go follow Richard on LinkedIn, but personalize that invite and then download the ebook. Maybe you find something insightful and tell him what that meant to you, because it meant a lot for Richard to take this today. So, and Andy, any last questions or?
Just want to say thanks, Richard. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, sharing your nuggets of gold, and I'm sure it was invaluable to our audience.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you having me on here and asking me to do it. I'm really excited. So thank you both.
Thank you for listening to the SDR Live podcast. If you like this episode, please share, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you tune in next week and have a fantastic week.